Hello, welcome everybody. I'm so grateful that everybody took time out of their busy schedules to come out to Sonoma County and see what we're doing here. Since I've met Jim and saw his working space in Healdsburg, and then was so pleased to get his book on building small, and I was just blown away with the response and how many of you came from so far away to see what we're doing here. And just want to say thank you so much for coming. We moved here with my parents many years ago when I was 10 years old to Healdsburg. And Healdsburg was just a little tiny farming town then. And in 2000, Piazza Development built the Hotel Healdsburg, and it changed everything in that town. And even though it wasn't a giant development, it really transformed everything around it. I think like a hotel, it has a unique opportunity to change the character of an area. Anyway, I'm here to speak to you about Sebastopol and this old industrial park. I was building multifamily and office and retail, kind of just regular stuff. When this industrial park came for sale, it was just a phone call from the family that owned it that I'd done business with in the past, and they said, hey, we're done building, and our industrial land in Sebastopol is just a real mess, and it needs to be fixed. And so I came out here, and I met with the mayor, and I walked this 12-acre site that we're kind of in the middle of, and I asked the mayor what he wanted, and he said, oh, we're rezoning all this, and we want residential housing here, and we think this would be a great site for multifamily and retail and kind of a new town center. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. So I signed up and I bought the property and hired architects and designed 300 dwelling units here over retail and new town square, a beautiful kind of perfect town USA, and actually modeled it a lot after Healdsburg. And so we presented at the public hearings, and I was shocked to see about 300 people coming out of the meeting room and down the street. And for 3 hours, public comment never stopped, and people just kept saying no, no, and no. And I had a guy with me, and he said he had flown in. He was going to put money in. He was like, I've never seen anything like this. This is the worst. This is the worst outcome I've ever seen for a developer. There's a line down the street saying, no, you're done. So I think it maybe took 2 hearings before I really heard him. But both times there was a line down the street of no. So then we shelved it, and that was in 2007. And then 2008 came, and I was thinking, geez, those people really saved my ass. It's like, that could have been devastating to be trying to sell 300 condos in 2009, So it's just so funny how things turn out, right? That you think it's bad, and no, it's good. Anyway, we did more public outreach. This is what we should have done in the first place, not just listen to the mayor and the town planner. So the community came out, and the community gave us a list of things that they'd like to see here in this site. And many of them are now here. But things like, walking and industrial and small business and no residential, a lot of things that they gave us, and then I had my own personal aspirations. And instead of hiring an architectural firm, we hired a landscape architect who had created a beautiful industrial park that's in Petaluma called Foundry Wharf, which is a small example of what you see here. And we hired a building designer named Thad Geldert, who was working for one of the top interior design firms in Napa doing homes, but he had a history of working for Gap doing their retail stores, so he had a good retail eye. So I let him design the buildings and work with Sandy to lay out the campus to the way that you see it over here. So the site's kind of cut in half. On the back side of this wall is the halfway mark. So this building and 5 others that are over here are all original buildings. This building was here since the 20s. They loaded rail cars right out here. We called this the railroad building for that reason. There were spurs on both sides. So I guess I'll go to my slideshow here so I don't skip around too much, and I'll tell you the story of how we built this. So There's me, Barney Aldridge, founder, developer. I've been in the real estate business for 25 years, and I came from the mortgage business, which also didn't do very well in 2008. But I never trusted the mortgage business, so I was always building my real estate development company on the side, and finally in '08, I was able to transition full-time to being a real estate developer. Next slide, please. So here we are. We're kind of sitting on the top part of that B, on the right-hand, upper right-hand corner of that B is where we're sitting. And you see the yellow line outlines our 12.5-acre site. And on the bottom half are all the new buildings that we built. So that's the campus that we kind of created from scratch. And then above the B are all the old buildings, which really have a lot more character. Even from this aerial footage, you can see that the site and the old buildings are much more interesting, in my opinion, than the new stuff that we built to kind of model after that. So all in all, the mixture of the old and new worked out well, and people like it. Can we go next? We've created a village or a community of people here, of cheesemakers, winemakers, distillery, artists. We have an organic grocery. We have crafts people here on the weekends. We have a crafts fair down the street for people working out of their homes. We have boutique retail. We have a butcher. We've got amazing chefs. We've got 3 breweries and 2 full production wineries, which, oh no, it does say winemakers on there. So there's quite a lot of stuff, but it's really based around food and wine and art. And we became known because of the first people we attracted were people that were very passionate about what they made. Guayaquil Yerba Mate, it's the largest yerba mate company in the country now. And they are based here, and they came here, and we started the village around them and their passion for tea. And then we got a coffee company, Tailor Made Coffee, a longtime Sebastopol company that imports their beans and roasts them here. So with the passion of those 2, we added Costa Brown, one of the premier Pinot Noir producers in California and really in the country. And we got them here. And then around that base, we had a lot of other people who wanted to be around these very successful, very passionate makers. And so that's what's kind of driven our community, which today is over 40 tenants in the brick and mortar. And on the weekends, we more than double that with craft producers on down the street and with tables. Can we go next? Our mission was to create and maintain, which is what we're doing now, a well-planned organic environment for the community to conduct business and share food, enjoy art and wine and time together like we're doing right here. So the community comes here in many of our different venues to eat and drink and spend time with the family. There's lots of stuff for kids to do here as well. Can we go? So the Barlow used to be, from 1910 to 2000, a place where local farmers would bring their produce, cook their produce, can and bottle, mostly apples, but other things like tomatoes, and then they would distribute here by rail out of all these buildings. So there was a big cannery behind us that we tore down and replaced. It was owned by the Barlow family, and all the other growers would bring their apples here, and then Barlows would process their apples and make it into stuff and then send it off. So that's what went on here until about 2000. And this is a picture of the, some of the Barlow family and some people that worked for them in 1949. We bought this in 2006, and we paid $12 million for it. We assumed an existing Wells Fargo loan, and the preliminary plan was to bulldoze everything and start from scratch and build that town I told you about, which didn't work. But there's what it looked like when we bought it. You see the 6 original up top, and then on the bottom is a 70,000 square foot warehouse that sat on top of a huge buried gasoline tank that was soaked deep into the soil. So the second plan, after the first development plan failed, plan 2 was what you see today. And I took, recruiting some tenants. I kind of set up an imaginary room with corrugated metal and renderings, which we'll show you here, to convince people that I could turn this really disgusting place into something special. And I got a couple of believers in Guayaquil, Costa Brown, and Taylor Lane Coffee. So these were some of the renderings that we used to show people how we were going to transform the site. But at the time, it looked terrible. But now it does look like this. It's amazing when you see these renderings actually come to life, right? That's the most fun thing about what we all do in this room. So some of the unique challenges were proposing a large project in a small city. This project's 220,000 square feet, and the town size is 7,800 people. So it's the largest development ever proposed here. The unique thing about Sebastopol is even though the town says it's 7,800 people, and I had to explain this to bankers over and over and over, I said, what town is 7,800 people but has 8 grocery stores doing 110 million a year in sales? So that got their attention. And really, Sebastopol's a hub for many surrounding communities. And as we stand here, there's 310,000 people within a 10-mile ring. So really, Sebastopol is one of the largest commerce cities other than Santa Rosa in the North Bay area. It's bigger than any commerce in Marin County and second only to Santa Rosa in the North Bay. But everyone thinks of Sebastopol as a tiny little town. But there's a lot of business being conducted here every day, which has obviously helped our tenants and the rents we're able to get and how we could absorb the 220,000 feet. Building in a flood zone, we're about 4, depending on where you look here, 3 to 6 feet below the 100-year flood line. And so you'll notice today when you go around that most of our buildings have concrete walls up to the flood line. And then in the openings, we have flood logs that we store that can be installed. So in the event of a flood, we install those logs. But engineering that was additional cost, time, and expense. And, it's certainly something to consider and nice not to build in a flood zone if you don't have to. And we had a flood here in 2019, so only 2.5 years ago. And for the first time since I own this property, it flooded. And I was not prepared for that. And our indicators weren't in place, and we failed miserably. We did not get our floodgates installed, and there was, about 18 inches of water in this room. Down at lower elevations, there was 3 to 4 feet of water, and it was devastating for us and devastating for our tenants. We all had to work together and, clean up a giant mess and then change our flood plan to the correct indicators, because we could have known there was a flood had we known what to look for, which area the forecast was coming. But never having lived through it before really kicked our ass, and it was tough. But we worked together. Most of the businesses closed for 4 to 6 weeks, which sounds like a horrific amount of time, but in the scale of things, it wasn't the end of the world. And we pulled it back together, and we've been running quickly ever since. Some of the other challenges were contaminated soil. As I mentioned, there was a gas tank here that had been removed, and the site was part of Superfund. And when I bought it, the original allocation was $1.5 million, and when I bought it, I think I got it with about $500,000 left in the Superfund account with the state of California, which means you do work, you pay for it, and then you send in money to be reimbursed. And we started trying to do all kinds of things like vacuuming, and there's a lot of consultants that had been here and burned through, because it started at $1.5 million. By the time I got here, somebody convinced somebody to spend $1 million, but they really didn't do anything. They were pulling up fumes and burning them off, but the soil was still soaked. So really the only way to fix it was to dig it out. And so we tore the building down, and then we did 100 by 100 foot, 30 foot, 35 foot deep pit in the center. We had to shore all the sides. And then I had lines of tractor trailers, dump trucks being filled all day. And because the soil was dirty, when I started, I thought that I could take it to a local landfill. But then when the science came back on it, we had just a hair too many parts per 100 or whatever to go to the local dump. So then we had to go 75 miles one way to Dixon. And that took our budget, as you can imagine. And that was the first of many painful days in the construction trailer here. And I sat there, I think the average was like 100,000 a day. was the problems that were coming on my desk during this build of this place, and the soil was an especially painful one. I ended up owing a trucking company almost $500,000 close to the end, and they were very nice and successful, and I took them out to breakfast, husband and wife that owned Den Bestie, and I said, I'm really in a tight spot here, and I'm trying to get this thing finished. And I still had a pile. I owed them money, but I had a huge pile to go. And I said, I need that pile to go. Would you guys consider trucking it for me and putting the balance on a second mortgage for me? And they did. So it ended up, I owed them about $400,000, and I had to get things finished for a year. And then when I refied, I paid them off. It all worked out good, but it was a tight spot. Some of the other issues here, construction plans, because we were in a hurry to get going, the civil engineering plans were way late. We hired a firm that was overwhelmed by it. They really didn't know what they were doing, and they delayed, and they delayed the whole project. And by the time they started delivering their first plans, we wanted to break ground. They were enough to get permits, but they really weren't right, and a lot of things were off. And we ended up having to hire a different civil engineering firm in the middle of construction to come in and fix it. And as you can imagine, I already had a bid from the underground contractor, and it's just amazing, even 8 years ago, what it cost to fix things in a street, and they'd say, oh, don't worry, it's an extra $55,000. Don't worry, you can't get soil compaction, it's no problem. Well, cement tree, it's just $210,000. And these things just kept piling up, so we went horribly over budget, and the developer needed more equity to finish the project. Yeah. So and I ended up having to sell all my Schwab account drained. I called a friend, the guy who sold me this, my mentor. I said, Ken, I'm short. The bank wants more equity. And he says, well, what are you short? I said, it's $2 million. Can you come back in and be my partner? And he's like, well, don't you still have that house in Marin County? And I said, yeah. He says, well, you're not short $2 million, you're only short $1 million. He said, call me when you've sold your house. So I sold my house, and I called him, and then he gave me the other $1 million. Yeah. So funny. Anyway, here's some before and after. So curating our tenant roster, we thought big, and we got Guayaquil Yerba Mate, we got Costa Brown, we got Taylor Lane Coffee, we got the organic grocery store. So starting with those big tenants helped a lot. Me in the little reality bending room with the corrugated tin and all the renderings, telling people what we were going to do, that was a big part of it. And then reaching out and picking tenants that we wanted and inviting them here. And then helping them with tenant improvements and financing to get them here went a long way to build the community. Having open areas, not just saying it's an industrial park, but saying it's retail and it's public, and here's a place for kids to gather, and here's outdoor seating, and this whole thing, we do weddings and events out here. Live music. This on Saturday night had 400 paid attendees for a reggae concert, and so there's a lot of constantly we're doing public events here. It's not a shopping center, it's a campus of passionate producers. Anyway, and it's always like I always tell my team, everything's in the details, right? It's all about the details, and that's what makes something great. Anyway, are there any more? These are our tenants, which we're going to walk around, and we can't show you all of them, but we'll show you some of them, and hopefully you'll come back sometime with your friends and family and explore deeper here. Financing. I sold some other projects to buy this place. The construction that I got from Wells Fargo in 2011, which was a miracle that I even got a construction loan in 2011. And it may have had something to do that when Wells Fargo had our loan at loan committee, Costa Brown just so happened to win Wine Spectator Wine of the Year for their Sonoma Coast. So #1 in the world. They were on the cover of Wine Spectator right when Wells was making the loan decision. And the loan decision was delayed, and it felt bad. It felt like I wasn't going to get it. And then here comes Wine Spectator, and next thing you know, the following week, we got our loan. Lucky. And then the preferred equity. So when Ken put in that extra $1 million, I had to give him preferred equity at a 10% return, which he has since. He's still our partner. And last year, we were changing something around, and we were doing all the accounting on the preferred equity. And he said, you know what, Barney, this thing's turned out so great. I'm going to erase all the preferred equity language in the LLC, and we're now pari passu. So that was a nice gesture. Yeah. Let's see, the construction debt was secured by the property, the preferred equity secured by the LLC, and the rate of return, I don't know, because we're still getting the returns, and it's to be determined. The construction debt was full recourse to me, and now we have no recourse other than bad boy carve-outs on the perm loan. Is there any other slides? Oh, this is our current financials here, the gross income. This is basically actuals through October and then an average of the year for the last 2 months to give you these numbers. But this is the visitor count here this year. So, COVID, it was quiet. And then we have a thing called Placer AI, and it tracks everybody's cell phones, but nobody particularly individually. But they give us amazing data, like how many people were here, where'd they come from, where did they visit, what was their route of travel to get here. And these are our monthly visitor counts, which we share with our tenants. And you can see they climbed a lot this year, peaking at 105 in July, August. We're still at 89. And historically, before COVID, 60,000, maybe 65,000 was our top month in the summer. So our business has gone way up since COVID, because it's an outdoor, spaced out place, I guess, or, just seems to be more relevant now than it was. Do we have anything else in there?
No, I think there you go. But we are tight on time.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of highlights on what you learned. Sounds like you learned a lot.
Yeah. I think I talked a lot about it anyway. I think making sure your plans are more than complete. A developer told me once there's a lot of ways to save money on a project, but plans aren't one of them. And it didn't resonate with me until I built this. Yeah.
What's your last one there? Offer TI credits, not individual scopes of work beyond the shell?
So in the beginning, we would say, oh, well, we'll build you this sink, and we'll build you this bathroom, and we'll build you, we'll do your lighting. We were doing specific, very job-specific things. And of course, then people imagined that the bathroom we were going to build them was going to have all this great tile, or the lighting was going to be, on dimmers, So we found it's much better to just give a flat credit to our tenants, but to give them something to help them get going, but let them figure out the details. Cool. Yeah. Any questions?
How big is your team that manages
Now?
Yeah, no.
I'm going to say like 10 probably. But could be 8, could be 11. Yeah, we self-perform most of our stuff. And then we also, as a very important part of our team, is our PR and marketing. So, and they're kind of off-site contract people, but we consider them part of our family, and we work really close with them. And in fact, a couple of them will be giving you guys tours today. Yes, sir.
A quick question on that point of being compared to passionate small business financing. Can you talk about how you did that?
Sure. I didn't set up a program. It was pretty random, but I go to the farm market, for instance, and there was this family making great tacos, and they had a line, and they were at the taco place. And I said, hey, why don't you guys come up? And I showed them a shell space, and I said, I'd love for you guys to open up a restaurant. Can you get some money to do it? And they're like, well, we tried. They called their friends. Nobody would give them money to do it. And the build out was about $250,000. So I said, well, how much can you come up with? And so they said, well, between friends and family, like $10,000 or something. And I said, well, $10,000 something. So we did the build out for them, the $250,000 build out, got their $10,000 in there, and then moved them in. And that was 5 years ago. And they're in, you'll see Barlow, Taqueria right over here. They're in about 400 square feet, and they're doing about $60,000 a month in sales. And they pay, all of our retails are on percent rent. So, I think we're at 7 or 8% is a rent that we get on that. So it worked out great for us, and it worked out great for them because they just were showing up at farm markets, setting up, breaking down, earning money 2 days a week. Now they've got a 7-day-a-week, brick and mortar operation for their family. And so because that worked there, we've multiplied that in several other locations, taking passionate, people who didn't have funds and giving them a chance. Yes?
Well, let's see one more question to Adrian. All right, we'll squeeze you in.
It sounds like you were pretty early with multifamily sort of division developer. How did you get the smarts to figure out just a whole different economic and marketing and curating model? Did you have like a partner? What did you figure it out?
Well, it was 2008. I went through a divorce. And so my net worth went from here to here. And basically all I had left was this industrial park with contaminated soil and very few choices other than doing this. I wouldn't have picked it. All right. Is there another question?
I was just curious because what's your parking ratio here? Because you're not dominated by parking, but you have a lot of buildings. And so, we always look at this as a model, and I'm just wondering.
Great question. Because it was zoned industrial and 65 to 70% of our square footage still is industrial, we're under a 2 per 1,000 parking count here, which we make. But in reality, we're underparked. And so we just purchased across the street over here a 2.5-acre site to build another parking lot because it's a problem. And then also since COVID, a lot of these businesses have expanded into their parking area, and now they don't want to give them back. And we don't want them to give them back because they're good.
Okay, we need to walk and talk so that